Martha, we need to talk. Brandon's voice carried that fake sympathy I'd heard him use with clients he was about to drop. After 19 years at Sturgis & Associates, I knew every tone in his repertoire. I followed him into his glass office, my stomach churning. The fluorescent lights felt harsher than usual, casting everything in an unflattering glare. Brandon shuffled papers on his desk, not meeting my eyes. "We're going in a fresh direction," he began, the words tumbling out rehearsed and hollow. "It's nothing personal, but you're just not a good fit anymore. The company needs younger energy." Younger energy. At 56, I'd apparently become dead weight. "Brandon, I don't understand. My performance reviews have been stellar. The Henderson account. The decision's final, Martha." He slid a manila envelope across his desk. "Your severance package is generous. Security will escort you out." I stared at the envelope, my hands trembling. 19 years. Missed birthdays, skipped vacations, weekends spent fixing his mistakes. All reduced to a manila envelope and a security escort. My colleagues looked away as I packed my desk, their silence deafening. The cardboard box felt impossibly heavy as I walked through those doors for the last time. I sat in my car for 20 minutes, staring at the building where I'd spent most of my adult life. The parking lot stretched empty around me, matching the hollow feeling in my chest. How do you explain to your family that you've been thrown away like yesterday's newspaper? At home, I placed the box on my kitchen table and stared at it. My coffee mug with the chip on the handle, the photo of Emma at her graduation, the small succulent plant I'd kept alive for 3 years. Pieces of a life that no longer mattered. The house felt too quiet. I'd worked so late for so many years that being home at 3 o'clock felt wrong. Everything felt wrong. I called Emma, but couldn't bring myself to tell her the truth. "Just checking in, sweetheart." My voice cracked slightly. She was busy with her own life, her own struggles. She didn't need mine piled on top. That night, I lay awake replaying every interaction with Brandon from the past month. Had there been signs, warnings I'd missed? Or had this decision been made in some boardroom where I wasn't even worth discussing? The worst part wasn't the firing. It was the casual cruelty of it all. The job applications blurred together after the first week. Entry-level positions that paid half my salary. Requirements that seemed designed to exclude anyone over 40. Digital native preferred. Recent graduate ideal. High-energy team environment. Each rejection email felt like another small death. We've decided to go with a candidate who better fits our company culture. Translation. Someone younger, cheaper, more disposable. I practiced interview answers in my bathroom mirror, trying to project enthusiasm for roles that would barely cover my mortgage. How do you explain a 19-year gap in your resume without sounding bitter? How do you compete with 25-year-olds willing to work for peanuts? The savings account dwindled. The house felt bigger and emptier each day. I started shopping at discount stores, calculating every purchase. Rice and beans became staples instead of luxuries. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, knocked on my door with a casserole. "Haven't seen you leave for work lately." The pity in her eyes made me want to crawl under a rock. Just between jobs, I managed, accepting the dish with shaking hands. Between jobs, like it was a planned vacation instead of a desperate scramble for survival. Hartwell Solutions occupied 3 cramped rooms above a dental office. The carpet was worn, thin, the coffee machine looked older than me, and the whole place smelled faintly of industrial cleaner. But Marcus Hartwell looked me in the eye when he shook my hand. "I can't pay much," he said honestly, "but I can promise you'll be valued here." The administrative position paid $30,000 less than my old job, but it came with something Sturgis & Associates had stolen from me. Dignity. My new coworkers were a ragtag bunch. Tom, the accountant, who wore the same 3 ties in rotation. Susan, the office manager, who brought homemade cookies every Friday. Jake, fresh out of college, but humble enough to ask questions instead of pretending he knew everything. They welcomed me without judgment, without pity. They didn't care about my past or my age. They cared about whether I could do the work. Marcus pulled me aside after my first week. "You're overqualified for this," he said. "But I hope you'll stick around. We need someone with your experience." For the first time in months, I felt like I mattered. Like I wasn't just taking up space in a world that had moved on without me. I was comparing prices on pasta sauce when Rebecca appeared beside me in the grocery store aisle. My old coworker looked nervous, glancing around like she was worried about being seen. "Martha, I'm so glad I ran into you." Her voice was tight with anxiety. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," I lied, clutching my modest basket. "Just fine." Rebecca bit her lip, clearly wrestling with something. Finally, she leaned closer. "I need to tell you something about why Brandon really fired you." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "He hired his niece, Ashley. Fresh out of college, no experience. The board doesn't know he created a position for her." Rebecca's hands shook as she spoke. "Martha, he fired you to make room for his own family." The pasta sauce slipped from my numb fingers, shattering on the linoleum floor. Tomato sauce splattered across my shoes like blood. "His niece?" I whispered. Rebecca nodded miserably. "I'm so sorry. I wanted to tell you sooner, but I was scared. We all were." Standing in that grocery store aisle, surrounded by broken glass and ruined sauce, I finally understood. It wasn't about performance or fresh directions or company culture. It was about nepotism, pure and simple. I couldn't stop thinking about what Rebecca had told me. That night, I found myself remembering a conversation from 2 years ago. Brandon had been stressed about the quarterly reports, panic sweating through his expensive shirt. "Martha, I don't know what I'd do without you," he'd said, collapsing into his chair. "You're irreplaceable. Absolutely irreplaceable." I'd stayed late that night, fixing his mistakes, making him look competent for the board meeting the next morning. He'd gotten the credit, as always, but I hadn't minded. I thought we were a team. "You're the backbone of this department," he'd continued, loosening his tie. "I mean it. If you ever left, this whole place would fall apart." Irreplaceable. The word echoed in my memory, bitter now with hindsight. How quickly irreplaceable had become not a good fit. How easily 19 years of loyalty had been erased for the sake of family connections. I'd been so naive, so trusting. I'd believed that hard work and dedication mattered. That loyalty was a two-way street. That being good at your job was enough to keep it. The Brandon in my memory smiled warmly, shaking my hand after that successful board meeting. The same hand that had slid my termination papers across his desk. Some promises, I realized, were never meant to be kept. Hartwell Solutions was like learning to walk again. Everything was smaller, scrappier, more personal. Marcus couldn't afford fancy software, so we made do with spreadsheets and determination. The budget meetings happened around one conference table, not in marble-lined boardrooms. But slowly, I found my rhythm. I streamlined their filing system, updated their client database, and reorganized their accounting processes. Small victories that felt enormous after months of rejection. "You've been here 3 weeks and already made this place run smoother," Susan said, refilling my coffee cup. "Marcus is impressed." I'd forgotten what it felt like to be appreciated for my skills instead of tolerated as overhead. At Sturgis and Associates, I'd been invisible until something went wrong. Here, my contributions were noticed and valued. Tom asked for my advice on organizing his files. Jake brought me questions about client communications. Marcus himself stopped by my desk to ask my opinion on a new project proposal. They saw me as capable, experienced, valuable. They saw me as a person, not a line item on a budget sheet. For the first time since the firing, I felt a spark of something I'd almost forgotten: professional pride. Maybe being forced out of Sturgis and Associates wasn't the end of my career. Maybe it was the beginning of something better. According to Rebecca's carefully worded texts, Ashley had arrived at Sturgis and Associates like a whirlwind. 22 years old, armed with a business degree and her uncle's protection, she'd immediately started improving systems that had worked perfectly for years. "She changed our client intake process," Rebecca wrote. 3 people quit in frustration. Another message came an hour later. She told Tom his filing system was totally outdated. He's been here 15 years. I tried not to feel satisfaction reading these updates, but it was impossible. This girl, barely out of college, was dismantling everything I'd built with the arrogance of youth and privilege. Brandon, meanwhile, was running damage control. Rebecca described him hovering over Ashley's shoulder, fixing her mistakes before anyone noticed, working late nights to undo the chaos she created during the day. "He looks exhausted," Rebecca wrote, "but he keeps defending her in meetings, says she needs time to adjust." Time to adjust. I'd been given 19 years to prove myself, only to be discarded overnight. Ashley got unlimited patience because she shared Brandon's DNA. The irony wasn't lost on me. Brandon had wanted younger energy, and he'd certainly gotten it. Unfortunately for him, energy without experience was just expensive chaos. I deleted Rebecca's messages and tried to focus on my own work. Their problems weren't mine anymore. Rebecca's next update made my blood boil. She'd finally worked up the courage to approach Brandon about Ashley's performance, only to be threatened for her trouble. "I can't take it anymore," she'd apparently told him. She lost the Kendrick files, double-booked 3 meetings, and sent confidential information to the wrong client. "People are talking." Brandon's response had been swift and harsh. "If I hear you undermining Ashley again, you'll be looking for a new job. She's learning, and I won't tolerate office gossip." Rebecca was devastated. She'd worked for the company for 8 years, with an impeccable record and glowing reviews. Now she was being bullied into silence to protect Brandon's incompetent niece. "I'm thinking about quitting," she confided when she called me that evening. "I can't work in this environment anymore." "Don't let them push you out," I told her. "Document everything. Every mistake, every threat, every instance of preferential treatment. What's the point? Who's going to believe me over Brandon?" "The truth has a way of surfacing," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it myself. "Just keep records. You never know when they'll matter." After hanging up, I stared at my reflection in the darkened window. Was I giving Rebecca advice I should have followed myself? My first real victory at Hartwell Solutions came unexpectedly. Marcus had been struggling to land a contract with a local manufacturing company for months. Their previous consultant had overcharged and under-delivered, leaving them wary of outside help. "They need someone they can trust," Marcus explained during our morning meeting. "Someone with experience, who won't make promises they can't keep." I volunteered to take the lead on the proposal. Drawing on my years at Sturgis & Associates, I crafted a presentation that was both ambitious and realistic. I knew exactly what questions they'd ask because I'd been in their shoes. The meeting went better than expected. The client, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Wells, appreciated my straightforward approach. No corporate buzzwords, no inflated promises. Just honest assessment and practical solutions. "When can you start?" she asked at the end of our presentation. Marcus nearly fell out of his chair. This contract would keep Hartwell Solutions afloat for the next 6 months. Driving home that evening, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: genuine happiness. Not satisfaction at others' failures, but pride in my own success. I'd won this contract with skill and experience, not connections or luck. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, celebrating at Murphy's. "First round's on me." For the first time in months, I had something worth celebrating. Ashley's biggest mistake came during a routine quarterly review, according to Rebecca's increasingly frantic messages. She'd somehow mixed up the financial projections for 2 major clients, sending each company the other's confidential information. The Hartwell account, ironically one of Sturgis & Associates' biggest clients, received sensitive data about their competitor. Within hours, both companies were threatening to terminate their contracts and pursue legal action. Brandon went into full crisis mode. Emergency meetings, damage control calls, desperate attempts to minimize the fallout. He managed to keep the news from spreading beyond the affected parties, but the damage was severe. "He's been locked in his office for 2 days, Rebecca reported. "Ashley keeps crying in the bathroom. She knows she messed up big time." The lost revenue would be substantial, but worse was the reputation damage. Sturgis & Associates had built their business on discretion and professionalism. One careless mistake had shattered years of trust. I tried to feel sorry for Ashley, but couldn't manage it. She'd taken a job she wasn't qualified for, in a field she didn't understand, protected by connections she hadn't earned. The consequences were inevitable. Brandon, meanwhile, was learning the cost of nepotism. Blood might be thicker than water, but it wasn't thicker than business relationships built over decades. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Emma called just as I was preparing dinner, her voice bright with excitement about her new promotion. Listening to her share her success, I felt a warmth I'd almost forgotten. The pure joy of watching your child thrive. "Mom, you sound different," she said suddenly. Better, somehow. I considered my response carefully. Emma still didn't know about the firing, about the months of struggle and self-doubt. I'd protected her from my pain, not wanting to burden her with my problems. "I've been thinking about resilience lately," I said finally, "about how we're stronger than we think we are." "That's very philosophical for a Tuesday night," Emma laughed. "But you're right. Remember when Dad used to say that tough times don't last, but tough people do?" My husband's words, spoken in Emma's voice, hit me like a wave. He'd been gone 3 years now, but his wisdom lived on in our daughter. He'd faced his cancer diagnosis with grace and determination, never complaining, never giving up. "He also said that setbacks are setups for comebacks," Emma continued. I think about that whenever work gets challenging. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet kitchen, surrounded by the simple comfort of home. My husband had been right about resilience. I was stronger than I'd given myself credit for. The firing had felt like the end, but maybe it was actually a beginning. Brandon's desperation was becoming obvious to everyone at Sturgis and Associates. Rebecca described increasingly erratic behavior, snapping at longtime employees, working all hours, looking haggard and stressed. He'd managed to contain Ashley's data breach, but at enormous personal cost. The affected clients had agreed not to pursue legal action in exchange for significantly reduced fees and additional services. The company's profit margin for the quarter was essentially wiped out. Meanwhile, Ashley continued making smaller mistakes daily. Scheduling conflicts, missed deadlines, inappropriate emails to clients. Each error required Brandon's personal intervention to fix. "He can't keep covering for her," Rebecca whispered during one of our phone calls. "People are starting to notice. There are rumors that the board is asking questions." The irony was perfect. Brandon had fired me to make room for fresh ideas and younger energy. Instead, he'd gotten a walking disaster who required constant supervision and damage control. His stress was visible to everyone. The confident manager who'd once dominated boardrooms now looked like a man constantly waiting for the next shoe to drop. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. He'd made his choice when he prioritized family over competence. Now he was living with the consequences of that decision, one crisis at a time. The accusation came through Rebecca, delivered with shaking hands and a breaking voice. Brandon had called an all-hands meeting to address recent performance issues and had pointed the finger directly at me. Before she left, Martha sabotaged several client relationships, he'd announced to the assembled staff. "We're still discovering the extent of the damage she caused." The lie was so outrageous, so completely fabricated, that I couldn't speak for several minutes after Rebecca delivered the news. My 19-year reputation, destroyed with a single false accusation. "Nobody believes him," Rebecca assured me quickly. "We all know what kind of employee you were, but Martha, he's getting desperate. He needs someone to blame for all these problems." I hung up and paced my small living room, fury coursing through my veins. It wasn't enough that Brandon had fired me unjustly. Now he was trying to destroy my professional reputation to cover his own mistakes. Every instinct screamed for immediate retaliation. Call the board, expose Ashley's incompetence, reveal Brandon's nepotism and lies. Fight fire with fire. But my husband's voice echoed in my memory. "Dignity is something nobody can take from you unless you give it away." I wouldn't give Brandon the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I wouldn't sacrifice my integrity for revenge. Not yet, anyway. That night, I found myself looking through old photo albums, searching for strength and memories. There it was, a picture from Emma's high school graduation. My husband's arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming with pride. "You're the strongest person I know," he'd told me that day. "Stronger than you realize." He'd been fighting his own battle then, the cancer already spreading despite the treatments. But he'd insisted on celebrating Emma's achievement, on being present for the important moments. "Life is going to test you," he'd continued, his voice gentle but firm. "It's going to try to break you down, make you bitter, steal your joy. But you get to choose how you respond. You get to decide who you become." I'd thought I understood what he meant then. Now, sitting alone in my quiet house, I finally grasped the deeper truth. Strength wasn't about fighting back or getting even. It was about maintaining your values when everything else was falling apart. Brandon could lie about me, destroy my reputation, steal credit for my work. But he couldn't touch who I was at my core. He couldn't make me into someone I wasn't. My husband had faced death with grace. I could certainly face a lying manager with dignity. The choice was mine to make. Rebecca had been busy. While Brandon spread his lies and Ashley continued her destruction, my former colleague had been quietly documenting everything. Emails, financial records, performance reviews, a paper trail that told the real story. I've been keeping copies of everything, she confided during our clandestine coffee meeting. Ashley's mistakes, Brandon's cover-ups, the real reason you were fired, I have it all. She slid a flash drive across the table. I'm not sure what to do with this, but I couldn't just stand by and watch him destroy your reputation. The drive felt heavy in my palm, weighted with possibility. Here was proof of Brandon's nepotism, evidence of Ashley's incompetence, documentation of the lies he'd told about me. Rebecca, this could get you fired. I don't care anymore, she said firmly. What he's doing is wrong. What he did to you was wrong. Someone needs to stand up to him. I pocketed the drive, unsure of my next move. Part of me wanted to march into the Sturgis and Associates boardroom and present the evidence immediately, but something held me back. Patience, my husband had always said, was its own kind of strength. Sometimes the best revenge was simply letting people hang themselves with their own rope. Brandon was digging his own grave. Maybe I should just let him keep digging. The cracks in Brandon's facade were becoming impossible to hide. Ashley's latest mistake, accidentally deleting an entire client database, had sent him into a panic that was visible throughout the office. He was screaming at IT for 2 hours, Rebecca reported, demanding they recover the files immediately. Ashley was in the bathroom crying again. The database was eventually restored from backups, but not before several clients noticed disruptions in service. Brandon had to personally call each one, explaining the technical difficulties while downplaying the severity of the situation. Meanwhile, the board had scheduled their quarterly review meeting. Rumors were swirling about unusual profit losses and client complaints. Several longtime employees had submitted resignation letters, citing workplace stress and management issues. He can't keep spinning these disasters, Rebecca whispered during our call. Eventually, someone's going to ask the right questions. I found myself feeling an unexpected emotion. Pity. Brandon had created this mess through his own arrogance and favoritism. Now he was trapped in a web of lies and cover-ups, desperately trying to protect his niece while his department crumbled around him. The man who'd once seemed so confident and in control was revealed as petty and weak. His position, his authority, his reputation, all hanging by threads. The knock on my door surprised me. It was 8 o'clock on a Thursday evening, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I recognized but had never met. Brandon's wife, Carol. She looked exhausted, her usually perfect hair disheveled, her eyes red-rimmed with worry. When I opened the door, she seemed to crumple. "Martha, I'm so sorry to bother you," she began, her voice shaking. "I know we've never really met, but I didn't know where else to turn." I invited her in, made tea, and listened as she poured out her fears. Brandon hadn't been sleeping, barely ate, jumped at every phone call. She didn't understand the details, but she knew something was very wrong. "He keeps saying the company is fine, that everything's under control," she said, dabbing at her eyes. "But I can see he's falling apart. Whatever's happening at work, it's destroying him." The irony was painful. Here was an innocent woman, worried about her husband's well-being, not knowing that his troubles were entirely self-inflicted. She had no idea about Ashley, about the nepotism, about the lies he'd told to cover his mistakes. "Please," she whispered, "if there's anything you can do to help him, I'm begging you. I know you two had some kind of falling out, but he always spoke so highly of you." I held her hand and promised to think about it, knowing there was nothing I could or should do. Carol's visit haunted me for days. I'd seen genuine fear in her eyes, real anguish over her husband's deteriorating condition. It reminded me that Brandon's downfall wouldn't just affect him. It would hurt innocent people who loved him. The flash drive Rebecca had given me sat in my desk drawer, its contents burning with possibility. I could end this with a single email to the board, expose everything, watch Brandon's world collapse in real time. But my husband's voice whispered in my memory. The measure of a person isn't how they treat their enemies. It's how they treat people who can't fight back. Carol couldn't fight back. She was collateral damage in a war she didn't even know was being fought. Ashley, for all her privilege and incompetence, was young and naive. She'd made mistakes, but so had I at that age. I made a decision that night, sitting in my quiet kitchen with the flash drive in my hands. I wouldn't be the one to destroy Brandon. I wouldn't send that devastating email or make those damning phone calls. If Brandon fell, it would be by his own hand, through his own choices. I would maintain my dignity, protect my integrity, and let karma handle the rest. Some battles weren't worth winning if they cost you your soul. The board investigation began quietly, triggered by a routine financial audit that revealed troubling patterns. Ashley's name appeared on payroll without corresponding hiring documentation. Client complaints had spiked dramatically in recent months. Key employees were leaving at an alarming rate. Rebecca became an unlikely whistleblower, not through deliberate action, but through honest answers to direct questions. When asked about recent staffing changes, she mentioned my abrupt departure and Ashley's sudden arrival. When pressed about client service issues, she provided specific examples with dates and documentation. They asked me to come in for a private meeting, she told me nervously. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, but I couldn't lie to them. The board members, seasoned executives who'd built their careers on recognizing dysfunction, quickly connected the dots. They requested personnel files, performance reviews, and detailed explanations for recent profit losses. Brandon, meanwhile, was frantically trying to control the narrative. He scheduled one-on-one meetings with board members, presenting carefully crafted explanations for each concern they raised. But the evidence was becoming overwhelming. The paper trail Rebecca had so carefully documented told a story that no amount of spin could disguise. The house of cards was finally beginning to tumble. Just as I was finding my rhythm at Hartwell Solutions, Marcus called an emergency staff meeting. His usually optimistic demeanor was replaced by grim concern as he explained the situation. "We've lost our biggest client," he announced. "They're restructuring and bringing their work in-house. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. We're in serious trouble." The contract with Patricia Wells had been carrying the entire company. Without it, Hartwell Solutions was facing potential closure within months. The small victories I'd celebrated suddenly felt meaningless in the face of this crisis. "We'll figure something out," Marcus said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Maybe we can find other clients, cut expenses, ride out the storm." I watched my coworkers' faces fall, saw the fear in their eyes. Tom was nearing retirement and couldn't afford to lose his job. Susan was a single mother supporting 2 kids. Jake had student loans that required steady income. These people had welcomed me, valued me, given me a chance when no one else would. Now they were facing the same uncertainty I'd experienced after my firing. That afternoon, I received a text from someone at Sturgis & Associates. "Heard about Hartwell. Guess Brandon was right about your judgment." The cruelty was breathtaking. Even in my darkest moment, they couldn't resist twisting the knife. The next morning, I did something that surprised everyone, including myself. I called a staff meeting and took charge. "We're not giving up," I announced, looking each of my coworkers in the eye. "We have something Sturgis & Associates never had. We actually care about each other and our work." I laid out a plan. We'd pool our talents, reach out to every contact we had, and create a comprehensive business development strategy. Tom knew accounting inside and out. Susan had connections throughout the city. Jake was brilliant with technology. Marcus had vision and leadership. "Martha, we appreciate the optimism," Tom said gently, "but we're just a small firm. We can't compete with the big players." "We're not trying to compete with them," I replied. "We're offering something they can't. Personal service, attention to detail, and genuine commitment to our clients' success." Over the next 2 weeks, we worked harder than we'd ever worked. I used every skill I'd learned in 19 years at Sturgis & Associates, every connection I'd made, every lesson I'd absorbed. We landed 3 small contracts in the first week. 2 more came through referrals. Patricia Wells, impressed by our determination, recommended us to a colleague. Slowly, carefully, we pulled ourselves back from the brink. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't guaranteed, but we were fighting for something worth saving. The confrontation at Sturgis & Associates was swift and brutal. The board called Brandon into an emergency meeting on a Friday afternoon, presenting him with a stack of evidence that painted a devastating picture of nepotism, incompetence, and deliberate deception. Rebecca watched from her desk as Ashley was escorted from the building, tears streaming down her face. Minutes later, Brandon emerged from the boardroom, his face pale and his hands shaking. "He looked like he'd seen a ghost," Rebecca reported. They fired both of them on the spot. Security packed their offices while they waited in the lobby. The board's investigation had uncovered everything: the unauthorized hiring, the data breaches, the false accusations against me, the systematic cover-up of Ashley's mistakes. Brandon's lies had finally caught up with him. Ashley broke down completely during the questioning, admitting to mistakes she'd tried to hide and revealing the extent of her uncle's protection. She was young enough to recover from this setback, but her business reputation was ruined before it had even begun. Brandon, meanwhile, faced complete professional destruction. Word would spread quickly through their industry network. No reputable firm would hire a manager who'd practiced such blatant nepotism and dishonesty. The man who'd called me irreplaceable had made himself unemployable. Justice, it seemed, had finally arrived. The call came 3 weeks later, just as I was leaving Hartwell Solutions after another successful day. I almost didn't answer the unknown number, but something made me pick up. "Martha?" Brandon's voice was barely recognizable, hollow, defeated, desperate. "I know I have no right to call you, but I'm begging you. Please." He was sobbing now, the proud manager reduced to a broken man pleading for help. The board had offered him a choice: find someone to clean up his mess and restore client confidence, or face a lawsuit for breach of fiduciary duty. "Come back," he whispered. "I'll give you my salary, my office, anything you want. Just please, help me save what's left of the company." I listened to his desperate pleas, his admissions of guilt, his promises of redemption. He painted a picture of a man who'd lost everything: his job, his reputation, his family's respect. "I was wrong," he continued, "about everything. You were the best employee we ever had, and I threw you away for my own selfish reasons. I'm sorry, Martha. I'm so sorry." The apology I'd waited months to hear finally came, wrapped in desperation and delivered far too late. "I appreciate the call, Brandon," I said quietly, "but I'm exactly where I belong now." I hung up and drove home to my new life.